Good morning. Good morning. I'm Connor Cape. I work with the marketing department here at Velocity Advisory Group, and I'm joined by our CEO and founder, Dave Fechtman, and senior advisor, Tom Feledick. Dave, Tom, how are you guys doing this morning?
Doing great. How are you, Connor?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you, guys. I'm going to share my screen here. And can everyone see my PowerPoint up? Or is it just me?
Not yet.
You see it now, Dave?
No.
Okay, well, we'll get the PowerPoint set up, but we're really excited about this webinar, the 5 musts of a successful strategic planning session. We've got our CEO, Dave, and Tom are about to dive in and give us everything we ever wanted to know about strategic planning. Dave has been the CEO of Velocity Advisory Group since its founding and a recognized authority on executive performance and organizational culture with over 25 years in leadership development and sales management. He partners with CEOs and senior teams to align strategy, strengthen leadership, and build intentional cultures that drive results. Since founding Velocity in 2009, Dave has guided hundreds of executive strategy sessions and helped thousands of leaders elevate performance across industries. Tom has worked with organizations in the US and globally to set the vision and execute roadmaps to strengthen market identity, operating effectiveness, and culture. He has more than 28 years in human resources, organizational design development, and strategic planning. His work spans multiple industries, including healthcare, life sciences, finance, technology, higher education, and local government. Those are your hosts. Those are the two experts on strategic planning. And wherever you are watching this from, go ahead and drop in the chat your location, and throughout, if you have questions, please fire away the questions. We would be glad to answer them as we go through this. And Tom, you're first up with a strategic planning success story.
Oh boy. Okay. Curveballs right out. Well, it is still baseball season, said the Phillies fan a little bit, but it's all good. So thank you very much. It is very much an honor to be here. So success story. So first of all, my absolutely strategic planning, organizational, creating a bold vision and then setting your plan to execute towards it has been a passion professionally and personally for a long time. And so when you see opportunities where that kind of comes together for a client, it doesn't get any more energizing than that. So one example, I guess I would share, a few years back, we engaged with a organization, national US-based organization, a large regional footprint around the country, actually several branches across the organization. And relationships maybe between the headquarters operation and all of those branches, maybe there had been some strain, some trust issues, over time, but the group got together and said, we want to set a vision collectively that we can achieve great things for our brand. And so they did. They set a very bold vision. They laid out a set of priorities and initiatives, and it was a 5-year view. And around 3.5 years into that 5-year view, their objective was very bold. They hadn't achieved all of their objective. They were making great progress towards it, but about 3.5 years in, they collectively decided to say, you know what, we're going to set the next horizon. We're making enough progress. We're seeing enough impact to be able to set a new bold goal. And then what are our plans to go after that? I would say that in and of itself is kind of an example of, strategic planning. Set a goal, line up, execute, show progress. I mean, that's the mechanics of strategic planning. But I think the thing that was most energizing is the fact that collectively the trust, the collaboration, and the culture had strengthened to the point that they wanted to keep going. And so it's like that balance between the what and the how. We're achieving the results, but we're also doing it in a way that we all feel real good about it. Let's keep it going. So, hopefully that makes sense as a success story. But thanks for the question.
And Dave, I bet you think I'm going to ask you about a success story of your own, but I want to hear a horror story. I want to hear when it's gone wrong and how it went.
Oh, geez. I feel like you gave Tom the better topic. Well, first of all, it's great to see everybody. And I would happen to say, I guess the topic of today really is to address both of these, to lean on our experience, Tom, from those success stories, but also given the hundreds of sessions between the two of us that we've been part of one way or another. Um, Unfortunately, there are a lot of horror stories. So I guess, Connor, one that comes to mind is we were working with a medical device company, and really, you're going to hear us talk about today, all the participants, the three phases of designing a strategic plan and executing. So at the beginning, preparation. This one client really leaned heavily on 2 or 3 people to help with all the preparation. So there was little buy-in from all the people that were going to be participating in the design and then ultimately the execution. And then when it came to the day itself, or the days to design the plan, there was a lot of turfism. There was a lot of personal agendas, and everybody that was approaching it was not working towards some sort of unified goal, like what Tom referenced. They were looking at it from their own personal well-being, and using this process maybe to get more resources or for their functional area to get more attention. Um, and it was interesting, and as an outsider working with this organization, it was really, really clear that levels of trust and ways to collaborate were new muscle for this organization. And then ultimately, when it came to the implementation or the execution of the plan, they did not really uh, do a nice job, frankly, on assigning responsible parties. So at the end of the day, um, it was a powerful exercise, at least to get them beginning this, but it was new muscle for this organization, so they didn't really design the critical things they needed to put into place to execute the plan. So we'll talk about these pitfalls today, right, Tom?
Absolutely.
And we'll talk about the do's and don'ts, and these 5 musts, I believe, are going to be absolutely critical for your organizations to do a great job.
And Dave, if we go backwards just a little bit to get some definitions, what is strategic planning? How is it different from budget planning and other types of planning that businesses do?
One of my favorite things, working with our clients, I'll say, all right, well, do you have a strategic plan? And I think most of you listening would say, well, yeah, of course we have a strategic plan. And oftentimes when we ask that question, great, can you send it to us? Can we look at it? They'll send us an Excel spreadsheet or a 4 or 5 slide deck, and that's what they consider their strategic plan. So I think the difference between business planning and budget planning and strategic planning is the horizon and the timeline that you're talking about. Usually, a well-designed strategic plan is further off in the distance. It's guiding longer-term initiatives. The stakes are a little bit higher than it would be in a budget planning process or just a business planning process. Usually, that process is designed to set you up for the next 12 months. And those should inform or be informed by your strategic plan. But the strategic plan gives you a little bit further of a view on the horizon. And really, it's the bigger things that you need to be focused on in order to accomplish your goals.
Tom, the timeline for strategic plans is evolving and shrinking. May have been 3, 5 years in the past. Now it's more and more common to see 12 to 18 months. Why is that?
So yeah, I don't know if it's a shift so much as maybe a trend, in terms of being able to kind of the horizon that you said. Most of the clients that I work with are probably in that 3-year range as far as their strategy. To Dave's point, what's the broader range? Kind of like the why. If budget planning is the what, strategy is the why. What's the context of what you're trying to achieve as an organization? And with that in mind, there are just so many changes. I mean, we're all aware of the different factors, workforce, AI, economic uncertainty, all of those things. The pressure in the short term to be able to deliver value incremental. And I would say that I mean, if I had to see a point, post COVID, we've seen more and more of this kind of shrinking timeline, probably for a lot of reasons that would take more time than we have today. But this idea of being able to set a horizon that's something that's bold enough, something that's out there enough that you can be aspirational is still important, right? But probably what's more increasing is that's great to have, but you need to be able to look at the next 12 months and demonstrate what are you going to execute to show value in that shorter term. So these ideas of like loftier aspirational that don't connect to, okay, specific milestone key performance indicator drive-in metrics, that's, you know, that's going by the wayside. So for us, a lot of it is about, you got to set the big picture, but you got to make sure that little picture stacks up to it. Right. So it's not tactical planning, but it's making sure that you have a vision. And then in your next, I say 12 to 18 months, but definitely for that next operating year, we're clear about what we're going to go after to show value towards that driven. That feeds budget planning. That feeds operational planning, because you still got to run the business. But from a strategy perspective, you can balance what are you doing to run the railroad, and then what are the things you're going to do to advance strategy. So
Yeah, Tom, I would say I noticed, you know, we've been doing this for a long time, both of us. 15 years ago when we started, or when I started in this business of doing strategic planning, it was easier to look out 5 years. Revenue was more predictable. A lot of the external factors were less fluid and less impactful than they are today. You mentioned COVID as kind of an interesting point. I do think that that was a point, but really, if you look at even 2025, there's geopolitical things going on. The AI is a major, major impact on business. So you look at the speed of change, and you look at external factors being much more significant than they were 10 years ago. It's forcing organizations to look further out, because if you go 5 years out today, there's a lot of speculation and guesswork involved. And we see a lot of our clients who are in municipalities, possibly, or government, and even government nowadays are looking at decreasing budgets. But back then, you could set a longer term horizon. We even did a few 10-year plans back in the day with organizations that had very predictable revenue streams. Now there's so much that is guesswork. It's almost irresponsible to do anything beyond 3 years.
And Tom, when you walk into an engagement with a client and you're thinking about that timeline, what do you look for when you decide what the timeline is going to be, how long it's going to be?
So you ask of course, right? You ask a lot of questions. I mean, it's about the preparation, the build of the plan, and then the execution. On the preparation side, that's really where that's really what sets the tone for the success or failure. I absolutely believe so. Understanding what are some of the challenges across the board, internal, external, maybe longer term, short term, immediate, trying to get a full picture from a client's perspective of where they stand, the environment that they're in, and what is going to deliver value for them. It's about what delivers value, either for the client's customer or their stakeholders, or for that client for their internal operation. So you got to ask a lot of questions to understand those. And then from that, and of course, it's important to have a meeting of the minds, you know, to say, okay, well, what makes sense? What is the objective? Is the board asking for a 3-year plan? I mean, there might be some other factors in there that are absolutes, but once you have a sense of where the priority is and what will deliver value, then you can set the horizon. So, for example, I can think of 2 clients over the last 3 years where what started as hey, we want to build a 3-year strategic plan. After doing a little bit more work, it actually made more sense for them to do a 1-year operational roadmap first to stabilize the organization, be it product, geography, technology, what have you, but really get the executive team like laser focused, or the extended team laser focused on what needs to accomplish, with an idea towards, yes, we're positioning ourselves strategically for things, but let's get that right. And then we can expand the horizon, right? But on the outset coming in, it was, let's talk, broader strategy. You just never know. But once you can get more insight in terms of what will deliver value, okay, then you can start to set the horizon from there.
Yeah, Tom, I think what you just talked about is, it's beautiful. As consultants, we can use 2 words that get us off the hook regularly, and it depends. And we can lean on that a lot, which is our hall pass or our free pass. So everyone on this call today, everyone that watches this webinar, we're going to talk about these 5 musts. Those are kind of non-negotiables, but things like the duration, the timeline, it really does depend on your unique situation, your organization situation. If you're going through a merger or a divestiture, you have new leadership, you lost a key account, your board has expectations of you, your whatever all these different factors are, all these around your design of your plan and how you go about executing your plan are going to be uniquely yours. And these are things that you have to really understand. And just reading a book at Barnes and Noble is not going to be adequate to make sure that you're developing something that's going to serve you and your stakeholders well.
Yeah, we talk about the 5 musts, the timelines, the session design, accountability, who's there, and then what the execution looks like. We
Mhm.
talked about timelines. We're getting into session design and that preparation. Dave, this question's for you. What does preparation look like ahead of planning?
Yeah. So, and for all the viewers, we're going to put those 5 things up at the end and really land on those at the end of the webinar. But a successful preparation, it really starts with making sure that you are hearing from all the critical stakeholders and that you're getting the different perspectives you need to design the plan properly. So how do you do that? Well, there's a few different ways. One, if your stakeholders actually have um, resources that like budgets or other things that are going to inform the planning process, you need to aggregate all those and bring that in. But some of the things that Velocity does, we make sure that we interview all the critical stakeholders. So generally there's a sponsor, there's a person that is responsible for the plan being designed and ultimately could be the owner of the plan once it's designed, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the CEO. It doesn't necessarily have to be the CFO. But it needs to be somebody that is passionate about the future success of the organization and that they're going to be, and they're influential enough, frankly, to own that. But you want to hear from your different stakeholder groups. You can do that through interviews. You can do that through surveys. But then it's really making sure that however you design the planning process itself, that you're looking at the right factors that are unique to your organization. How are you going to look at your current state? How are you going to establish your unified goal or your North Star? So preparation is really key, hearing from different perspectives and then bringing the right resources to the process.
And if I may just kind of vibe off that for a second in there, I think absolutely just ditto everything, Dave, you just said. And the other side, particularly as it relates to the interviews, I find that being able to have a connection, individually to hear not only the content, but then really kind of build a little bit of a sense of a connection or relationship with those individuals does help when you're in the room together. Because you may be talking about sensitive issues. There may be backstories that are involved. I mean, when you're getting heads down and doing planning. So having that, not only kind of the information gathering, but then also that connection helps as well when you go into a working session. The other side, as far as preparation, and I'll stop there, is we believe in honoring past work. So respect the past, be realistic about the present, be optimistic about the future is kind of one of the mantras that we use on strategic planning. And so for us, if there is past work, past strategy, even the spreadsheet that Dave mentioned, or strategies or business plans, or if there was other work that had been done that maybe didn't, where, you mentioned like, is there a dusty, strategic plan sitting on a shelf somewhere? We'd like to honor and look at all of that to be able to help say, well, how do we learn from that past history, all those artifacts as we set the future? So it's the conversations and the stakeholder feedback, prior client customer surveys, net promotion scores, all that data. We'd like to be a funnel. Let's take it all, then synthesize it, and then we have a full picture going into where do we go from here.
Connor, I two more comments on this, and then we can move on to the next question. But if I'm a listener in today's webinar, there's another thing that you need to address before you start this process during preparation, or any elephants in the room, anything that would stand in the way of a successful event. And it's really important for whoever's facilitating. If you're self-facilitating, it's really critical. I know this is one of our things that we're probably going to cover anyways, but you can't participate and facilitate at the same time. So we always caution our clients, one of the reasons why people bring a firm like Velocity in is so there's third-party objectivity in this whole thing, but make sure that whoever's facilitating doesn't feel the need to also be a participant. But you have to address baggage and personal agendas and all those things up front, so they're not carried into the session and then become a major distraction.
And that is a segue into our next question, but I'll just give a shout out to the chat real quick. Everybody is chiming in mostly from the East Coast, Maryland, Florida, Georgia, Virginia, Massachusetts, Vermont. If you guys have any questions, drop them in. We'll get to them as we go, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end as well. But this next question is for both you guys, and Dave, you can take the lead because you were just touching on it a little bit. Who should be at the table, and why should they be at the table when you're doing the planning for your strategic plan?
Yeah. I would say there's probably two constituents that need to be at the table. One are the people that have the knowledge and the insight and the vision of where the organization needs to go. So generally, those are people at the highest levels in the organization. They need to have skin in the game, and they need to have their vision and their perspectives shaping and forming the plan. The other group of people that I think should be involved in it are the people that actually be responsible for the execution of the plan. So generally, we'll see a few things. One, depending on the size of the organization and geography and all these other considerations, you'll see it not be unusual that you have a meeting with maybe the C-suite, and they work on the highest level of priorities, and they have line of sight into things that maybe others in the organization don't. And they set the table, and then the people that are going to be responsible for making it happen, getting stuff done, there's probably another word you could insert in there, that group of people should also have a piece of the process, because imagine that they feel no connectivity to the plan. It was just kicked over the fence and thrown to them like, here you go, here's your strategic plan. If you don't involve that group of people, they're going to kind of look at you and go, you missed something critical. I feel no passion or ownership of this thing, and they're not going to prioritize it properly. So I think it's the top level as well as the next level of leaders.
I would, if I can just jump in real quick, absolutely. Again, I'm going to go ditto what Dave said, and that some of the dimensions does depend. I mean, depending on the nature of the organization. So, from an executive perspective, typically I will see executive leadership team, so that top tier, or what we sometimes call an extended executive leadership team. So Dave, to your point, individuals who have subject matter expertise or accountability for ownership. So it's still a small and manageable enough group, but it does represent either the senior executive decision makers, the people that are making decisions around budget, time, shifting priorities, et cetera, and then maybe some of those key functional leaders, or sometimes next generation up and coming leaders that you're trying to give experience and exposure to help develop talent in the organization. We've seen them as well, but it's like, keep it manageable within that area. Depending on the organization type or structure, we see this a lot in not-for-profit. Sometimes there's a blended board and management team situation where you either have kind of a designated strategy committee of the board that convenes leadership and staff and some board members to kind of jointly, that may, if that's a matter of governance or an interest of governance, depending on how you're set up, that may be a structure that you go after. But I would say regardless, try to keep it small and manageable enough that you can make decisions, talk about key issues, talk about the elephants in the room, and really come out with it. Heads are nodding on priorities and initiatives. We can do this thing. Maybe we can deprioritize something else, like really making heads down decisions around what we're going to focus on. The people in the room should really be either key in making the decision or setting the priority, or impacted for execution. They have true skin in the game. It would be nice if so-and-so was in there, or they might be able to contribute to this conversation. You have some of that, but for us, we see the most effective when it's more the people that are really directly impacting to setting or executing strategy, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and talking about what you guys have seen when you guys have done hundreds of these yourselves, can you guys share an anecdote or an example? We'll start with you, Dave, where that prep work ahead of time was the difference between the plan working and not working.
Well, in our case, again, if you use an outside facilitator, which obviously we're proponents of, and not just, even if it's not velocity, objectivity and perspective really matters, because if your only perspective is what you have from your organization, you're going to have blind spots in this whole process. but from a preparation standpoint, one, it helps your facilitator really know potential landmines. Sometimes the CEO has a pet project or something that he or she is really passionate about, or the board has a mandate. If you don't know those things going into it, or you gloss over those things as you're going through the plan design, when you move to execution, there's going to be glaring gaps in this. So I think anecdotally, I would say I probably have countless examples where we probably didn't ask the right question, and there was a landmine, or there was again, I keep using this term pet project, but there was something that there's a lot of eye rolling going on, but the CEO's proud and they're really excited about it, and no one else is on the same page. If we don't prepare, we get really excited about it too, or we don't emphasize it enough, and then there becomes a lot of sidebar conversations. I want to be really clear, when you actually are in the plan design phase, so those couple days or few days where you're working on designing your strategic plan, time moves at warp speed. So if you are in the middle of this thing and you have to take a half-hour detour to explain something because you didn't prepare well enough, it can completely derail. And we've had instances where we had to push pause, and if it was a multi-day event, hopefully it wasn't the final day, push pause, regroup, and then go again. Sometimes you don't have the luxury of time to do that. So preparation's critical.
100%. I mean, if you're in that 2-day intensive session and you really want to come out with meaningful decisions and agreement around vision, priorities, and then initiatives for that next 12 to 15 months, then you need to make sure that people are on the same page around content, issues, themes ahead of time. So one of the things that we do, no less than the week prior, we'll distribute what we call a briefing packet for every 2-day strategy session. And this is not uncommon in industry, but there is an accountability that we do share with the team to say, here's the information, survey results, course final agenda, any other reference documents that are important for people to have for reference, and then other key questions to think about in advance of the situation. We do give pretty robust homework for these sessions, but the reason is so that, to Dave's point, we're not presenting this stuff in a 2-day session. The working session is we are literally doing the work of building out those elements. And so where I've seen it pay off most effectively, this actually just happened 2 weeks ago, and I think it's the first time that I've ever experienced this kind of dynamic. But strategic planning session, identifying kind of priority initiatives for the coming year. This is a company that we've worked with for several years. Their vision did not change. Their priority buckets did not change, but they needed more alignment in terms of what are they going to invest in the next 12 to 18 months. So we put together a briefing packet. It was a summary of a number of different factors, including interviews and surveys with everyone, distributed that out the week prior. And then fast forward to the session, we did a breakout session where we split the group into two. And we asked them to say, okay, based off what we heard, we did some framing discussion work up ahead, but then we said, okay, this team goes over here, this team goes over here, executive league, extended leadership group kind of thing. Come up with what you would believe if we were to place bets on 5 initiatives to really advance towards priorities, towards the vision, what would they be? For the first time, these groups, when they presented out, they used slightly different words, but their priorities matched 1-to-1. And it was really cool to see that, what someone was saying around technology or infrastructure or customer relationship management, that while the wording was different, they actually complemented each other. They locked in on the same 5-to-5. And so we went deeper on that. And they said, well, when we went through the pre-work, you could see it was emerging that these were the ideas, these were the focus. And so it was more kind of a straightforward to get to that point, which was great. So they were able to get alignment earlier in the session, which was great as well, because we could spend more time doing the deep dive work on how do we make that happen in the next 18 months. We didn't have to spend as much time debating or discussing, or it depends, those kinds of things. The groundwork, and I would say the preparation, absolutely, you set the foundation to be able to do that.
And for the
Connor,
question, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, just one more quick thing to share on preparation. If you're the one on this call, you're the one that's actually responsible for setting all this up. You need to also make sure that the participants have a clear mind and a clear agenda. Clear calendar. When we see that two or three of them are sitting there DMing each other during this workshop, or they're responding to emails. There's no more critical time in your year around than setting the direction of the organization. And when people have a lot of distractions, that tells me that the team has not prepared properly to clear agendas or make sure that this is critical. The other thing I would say too is you should not do this on site at your place of business. You should do your plan off site. So that takes preparation as well. You go to a local hotel and rent out their conference room, or go to a client and use their conference room, but get off site. You do not want to do it where it's business as usual. We see that as a major pitfall. And when that happens, people are hopping in and out, they're interrupting you. And that indicates to folks like me and Tom that you did not do a good enough job of setting the table. Last thing on this is make sure you have all the right resources you need. We've shown up where there aren't flip charts, there aren't projectors or TV to share. And you're sitting there in the Stone Age, just talking and scratch pads of paper that the hotel gave you. So we bring our resources. You need to bring your resources too for preparation.
That's a great answer. Great. And Bob asked a question. Dave, you have underscored several times the use of an outside facilitator. Do you suggest having a single or double facilitator? And then Tom, can you speak to this as well? What's the benefit of two? And can you share a success story, please?
Yeah, I think it depends on the size of the organization. I think it also depends on if this is your first time doing a strategic plan, or you're on years 2, 3, 4, 7, 19, or whatever. So in later years, you can probably get away with one. There's probably benefit to having two, and the initial first year of doing something like this. The reason I talk about an outside facilitator, again, is not just for organizations like Velocity to get work. It's really because if the CEO or anyone, HR or anyone standing up there with the pen, everyone in that room thinks of it as that person's plan. And it gives them a hall pass on not feeling connectivity to that plan, or that they're responsible for the execution. Oh, that's Connor's plan, as opposed to Velocity's plan or XYZ Inc.'s plan. So an external facilitator, again, allows you to participate, not just facilitate, but more importantly, it doesn't become one person in your organization's plan. It's everyone's plan. So those are the reasons why, depending on the size and the complexity, two is always preferred, but you can get away with one in many instances. Good question, Bob.
And yeah, as well, just again, ditto, Dave. But it's not always possible, but the opportunity, whenever I can say this individually, whenever we have the opportunity or the situation warrants it to have two facilitators, there is added value there. I agree. Depending, if you're going year 3 and it's more of a refresh or continuation, maybe you don't need it. Versus on the upfront, yeah, I think there are enough variables in there that it makes sense just to make sure that you've got that enough kind of oversight. The one area where I think the additional value add would be in either the area of like subject matter expertise or industry expertise, or even kind of organizational understanding. So like as I say, strategic and operational planning is my passion. And I feel very grateful to do it across a number of different vertical markets. But when I have an opportunity to co-facilitate with someone that is deep, either in a particular vertical market, I can go deep enough, maybe not to say to be dangerous, but to understand. But if I have someone that's really deep in that industry, manufacturing, deeper in pharma, we do a lot of work with family businesses. That's another example where if someone really understands and is a specialist in the unique dynamics of a family-owned business and some of those factors, there are certain things as a facilitator from a straight strategic planning side, I might not have line of sight to, but I've seen the opportunity when you can facilitate with someone that can go deeper, you can kind of play off each other. You might be able to test out some dynamics in the room, and it leads to a deeper impact, and more impactful outcome as a result of that. So I see a ton of value.
Yeah, and you guys have talked about the importance of the facilitator. When you guys are there, when you're on the ground with a company working on this plan, what do you guys do to keep the energy high and to keep dialogue honest? Because obviously the plan doesn't work if everyone's not honest and on the same page about the plan.
Uh,
Uh, Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'll just jump at Jim real quick, real quick. We mentioned the one-on-one interviews and the discussions. To me, that's an example of where that kind of comes through. If I, as a facilitator, can establish enough of a connection with everyone that's going to be in that room for that session, and it's meaningful enough, and I can start to establish the beginning of a relationship, that really does help with some of these more sensitive conversations when you're in the session. So that, to me, it's having that ability to be able to have connected versus, okay, here's the outside facility coming in, we're doing something a little bit more static. I've already gotten a little bit of a momentum on the conversation just by having talked to people in advance. So that's where preparation comes in. The other thing I will say in terms of building energy, flip charts aside and room prep aside, absolutely essential. We've been moving a little bit away from it in some of these sessions I would say, over the last 2 years, not to say we're going digital, but real-time building. So in the classic sense, if you picture flip chart paper all over the wall and a lot of different writing and scribbling and voting dots and all that stuff, those are important elements to get people on the same page. But for me, I can find myself, I got a big enough screen and I got my laptop. Let's just throw it up here and start building this thing real time. So like build the grid, I've done where we're building, vision statements in real time and we're editing in real time. My point on the energy side of around that is to say, if people can feel like they're really hands-on and they can see the work product as we're doing it, to me, I've gotten the feedback that helps create energy. People are saying, wow, it's not this kind of, okay, we're going to do this flip chart, have these great conversations, and then conceptually a few weeks from now, we'll get a deliverable. We're building the deliverable as we go, which is the way we structure these sessions. So, I mean, regardless. So if you're leading it even internally, anything you can do to kind of show people what you're building as you're building it, that's going to build connection, and people are going to feel, oh, I can see where this is going, or I can see what the output's going to be, or I can see my authorship in it, those kind of things.
Yeah, I think we have a few secret tools, and they're not going to be secret here in 2 seconds after we share them. But there's a few things that we do, and we would encourage you to do if you do self-facilitate that bring energy into the process. One, you have to make it extremely interactive. So we, even though we are building real time, and we had a client in Florida that just said the big difference, having gone through these for years, it was watching Tom actually bring the plan to life in front of us with us. So that was something that dynamic approach to it was celebrated by the client. That was one where we had both Tom and I were on assignment together. But there are a few things. One is establish goals up front for the time together, and then reference those goals throughout the workshop. So that's one thing. The other is getting people out of their seats and creating stations and having them collaborate together, not just kind of a hub and spoke model where they're just interacting with the facilitator and the facilitator is writing stuff down, but actually having them interact with each other. So the energy level rises there. One of the things that we love to do is start off with points of pride, having them talk about the successes that they've had over the last 12 months. Tom, you're smirking because it's a great technique, right? But having them talk about, wow, this is exciting. Their endorphins, their dopamine, everything's firing on all cylinders because they're coming in like, hey, we've got some tailwind here. We've got some things that have gone on really well. Those are things that we do to kind of juice the environment, give them some enthusiasm, and get them engaged and moving before we hop into other sessions.
And you both have said, as we've gone through this, that good plans, you can have a great plan, but if you don't execute it, the great plan is worthless if you can't execute. What are usually the first breakdowns that you see in the execution phase, Dave?
Well, let's talk about, to me, everything that we've talked about, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is what matters most is once the plan's designed, you move to execution. And there are varying statistics out there, but I think the one that we use most often is about 70% of plans that fail, it's because of execution. So why is that? One, strategy seems heavy. It's not integrated into operations. So they keep strategy as this separate thing. We're gonna run the company, and once a quarter we'll talk about the strategy. So it needs to be living and breathing. It needs to be incorporated into operations. That's one thing. Two, you need to track and monitor and have accountable parties. We're going to talk about that on the 5 musts, but we need to know, once there are specific initiatives that your organization needs to do, who's going to do it, by when, what does it look like, what do they need, all those factors. How do you measure success? All these things have to be kind of built into that. And then you have to regularly be working on these things. So there has to be a plan champion. There needs to be one single owner of each initiative that is attached to the plan. There needs to be deadlines. There needs to be measures of success. These are things that are absolutely paramount in order for the execution to take hold. You also shouldn't set your plan and 1 year later set your next 12 months. This is something that you need to make adjustments as circumstances change, no less than once a quarter. So these are best practices that you need to embrace, and that we strongly encourage. And one of the things that I love about working with Tom, and I think that we do well at Velocity just in general, is we are going to sit there and we're going to be your accountability partners as well. We're going to meet with you quarterly. We're going to make sure that you're advancing your plan. Whether you use something like RACI or you use a project management system, whatever it is that you use to track and advance your plan, we're going to help you massage that, because we know for not all organizations, or for several organizations, it's not natural. This whole strategic planning muscle is not natural or developed. So we work with our clients on making sure that they're executing the plan.
Yeah. And I mean, I would, just to kind of echo a couple of those points, one of the things to not fall into that pitfall, right? I think there is a stat out there that says 70% of strategic planning efforts fail to meet their stated objectives. And, and I always say, people say, why? It was like, well, life happens, right? You had a great session, a lot of energy, good stuff, and then, went back, right? So it's like, what's the day 2, day 3, day 4? So that, to Dave's point around continuity, couple of things to make sure that there's clarity enough coming out of the session on kind of what is the roadmap, right? So our architecture, 3-year or 1-year vision, whichever horizon you choose. What are your priority buckets? What are 3 to 5 focus areas? And then initiatives. What are like 3, no more than 5 areas of effort tied to that priority that you can execute in the next 12 to 16 months. That's the way we try to look at it. So making sure that before we get out of that 2-day session, we've got enough clarity on the scope, ownership, sponsorship, key milestones. We have to build a whole tactical plan. But for those initiatives, that's really what you can be looking at and hold accountable to have reference back, so that when you have staff meetings in the weeks ensuing, or you're coming through, that you've got enough of a game plan that everyone's like, yep, if we can accomplish these things, we're showing progress towards the priorities, we're going to be moving towards the vision. Cool. Right. So that's what we try to make sure we get out of that working session with enough, so that people say, all right, we know what we're marching towards. So that piece kind of documents, we call that the strategy roadmap at a glance. Some have said it looks like a breakfast menu, but we try to get it to one page that says, okay, like this is it, vision, priorities, initiatives. And we put the 12 to 14 months at the top, just not to have a tactical plan, but like that's the journey that we're on. And then every 12 months, not every 12 months, every quarter at least, we will review that and we'll sit down and look, life may have happened. We may need to adjust things. There might be an external factor, what have you. We can move milestones. We can shift. It's not the plan itself. It's the planning. It's the making it a living document that we try to focus on. But having the roadmap level sets for everybody, having the quarterly reviews or whatever cadence you want to use if you're facilitating internally, some way to bring it back and keep it fresh. If you can incorporate that into an existing staff meeting, awesome. If it's something that you can make as a standing town hall topic to keep people connected, generally great. How do you embed it in what you do, not make it a separate thing? So I would say that piece is definitely kind of from a reinforcement, very important. And then I would just go totally tactical for a quick second and say your next 1 to 2 key meetings. Maybe it's an executive team meeting. Maybe it's a board meeting, but we don't leave one of our planning sessions without at least, it's kind of like in a football team, sometimes the first 12 plays are scripted. What we try to do is kind of project out to the next 2 major meetings and make sure that they connect to this story. So it's not like great session, but that your next executive, your next leadership meeting is like business as usual, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like, so it's how do you make sure that you kind of build that in so that there is that continuity to stave off the drop off factor. So great question.
And if someone out there is watching this and following along, and they're thinking about a plan that maybe they had last year, and they're thinking about it, going, well, we haven't really stuck to it. It's kind of collecting dust over on the side. What can they do this week, next week, very quickly to revive it and get it going again?
Well, I think the number one enemy of strategy is success. I think it's really hard to be strategic and think long term when you're crushing it. And it's probably the best time of when you should be thinking longer term, because you're not in a fire drill situation. You're not in a stressful situation. So I think oftentimes when we see plans collecting dust, it's not because they're struggling. When organizations are struggling, they're willing to lean on anything to get out of their situation. It's when things are going really well. So be more strategic in the good times, I guess, is a message to everybody. Um, I think that the other thing, if you believe in your plan, then you haven't set up the right infrastructure to execute the plan. So Tom hit on those. Make sure everyone in your organization knows your highest priorities. Every single employee should know your handful of most important priorities. You should be addressing these in your bi-monthly or monthly meetings. There should be dedicated time towards how are you doing on these major initiatives. So meeting hygiene is going to be really, really critical for plan execution. Two, you want to make sure that your plan, as you dust it off, you want to make sure that it's still relevant. There may be some circumstances have changed that it's not, pieces of it at least aren't relevant anymore. So you want to, maybe do a start, stop, continue, and say the things that aren't relevant, let's stop focusing on those. But a lot of it is around commitment, hygiene, accountability. And generally speaking, there's not somebody ultimately responsible for it. They look to the CEO and that's just wrong. You guys should have somebody that they are really passionate about the long-term viability and success of your company, your organization. They're a good candidate to really own this and keep all the stakeholders committed to it.
Yep. I would add through from the dusty strategic plan stereotype that it's a great opportunity to ask the why questions, right? Even if it is something that's kind of sitting out there, take it off, take a look through it and say, okay, why was it life happened? Was there another, event that kind of, like impacted, but what can we learn from it? So ask the why questions to get a sense of kind of what happened for lessons learned, then come back and say, what are the nuggets? What are the elements of this that we can really there was good stuff in here. We may not have executed it, but it was really good, really impactful. How do we carry this forward? And take stock of that. So, I mean, if it's internally, if you're looking and say, kind of do some of that reconnaissance ahead of time, then maybe you pick a conversation, trusted colleague, or maybe you're being asked to take a look at this and carry it forward, but put together your thoughts and have a conversation with someone and say, been thinking about our strategic plan, or I know our strategic planning is coming up. Last year was this, for whatever reason, we do have a number of areas that could really help excel, us forward. Here are my thoughts as far as how we can really not fall into that or take it to the next level if you have made some momentum. But, if it's dusty, take stock, ask the why questions, identify where the areas of value that you can still carry forward, even if you go forward in a different way, or maybe you right size some of the initiatives or whatever those, get your thoughts together in terms of how things could progress. And then, have a conversation with a peer or colleague or a boss and say, what, here's my thoughts in terms of how we can take this thing forward.
And in this same realm, Grace asked, how do you know when it's time to adjust or shift a strategic priority? And how do you distinguish between being adaptive versus giving up on a goal too soon?
So generally speaking, the way that we construct a strategic plan, you have your your unified goal or your North Star or your vision statement, whatever you want to call that at the tippy top, that's what you're striving for the next few years. That's supported by a handful of initiative or a handful of priorities. Those you don't really want to switch out more frequently than every 3-4 years. So it's at the initiative level of when do you fish or cut bait. And to answer Grace's question, it, did you take a really good attempt at that initiative, and for whatever reason it didn't work? Did you not even try the initiative? So going back to my cheat of it depends, going back as leaning on those two words, it really depends on why that initiative didn't gain traction. So I always tell organizations, just be honest with yourselves. Did you prioritize these things properly? Were you too ambitious? Are you trying to boil the ocean? Did you have too many initiatives and you didn't know which ones to really focus in on? Tom, you mentioned those handful that are critical earlier. So I think, Grace, it's just having an honest reflection of why it didn't work. And if it was like more behavioral, then change those behaviors and get to it and be committed to it again. If it was the wrong initiative, or you, in some instances, maybe you executed it and it doesn't serve you anymore. It really depends on the why behind it, and then you can pivot accordingly.
Yeah, and I would say, just as to add to that, as it relates to the roadmap, one of the things that we see in setting milestones and kind of charting out the next 12 to 14 months for an initiative, you can actually put in checkpoints. So we've had this a lot with initiatives, say, look, okay, we may want to pursue this initiative, but if it's not moving in 6 months, we want to reserve the right to be able to cut it fast so we don't wind up escalating commitment to something. So you can actually plot out a milestone that says, okay, let's consciously define our initiative so that for the next 6 months, we'll do an interim checkpoint at 3 months. And then at 6 months, maybe we do a go, no go. But like it goes to how you define the initiative, including how might you assess, what is your threshold to either keep going, or, if we want to maybe hold, if it's not delivering that value, we want to divert resources elsewhere, let's just go into it with open arms, and or open eyes and arms, I guess. But then you can, carry it through from there.
So Connor, should we share the 5 musts and recap those for the group? It's probably right on cue, huh?
Absolutely. And then if anybody has questions, please start dropping them in. We'll go through these, and then I'll give you guys some space to talk about these, and then we can answer some questions if there's some at the end. But this is the important part here. These are the 5 musts, Dave.
Yeah. So Tom, I'll just do a quick overview and then chime in, and I would love to hear from the group. So please ask any questions. So number one is, we talked about this earlier. What is the duration of your plan? You have to know where your destination is. If you think of GPS, strategic planning is you're going from your current state, so today's October or whatever, I should know that, to your ideal future state. You have to know where it is you're going and how long your plan's going to serve you. So the number one thing is determine your duration. Tom, you recommended 3 years. I think that's a good starting point. If you're in a very dynamic industry, if you're in a very dynamic period of time in your company, maybe consider 2 years. Number two is your session design. We talked a lot about the preparation, but you want to make sure that your agenda and the ways that you designed your session itself are going to serve you well. So if you don't design the session correctly, or the period of time correctly that you're building your plan, you're going to come up with a plan that's not going to serve you well. It'll be deficient in one way or another. So put the time in, design it correctly, make sure your agenda is designed properly. And we're happy to meet with anybody. If you do choose to self-facilitate, reach out to Tom, reach out to me. We're happy to review the agenda with you and see if it's going to serve you well with what you're trying to accomplish. Number three is accountability. Without accountability, we talked about some of the questions that were asked and some of the things we talked about. With low degrees of accountability, the likelihood of you executing your plan properly go down significantly or up significantly. So you have to know who is it that's responsible for each initiative. There needs to be one person. It needs to be clear It needs to be concise, and it needs to be outlined of when it's going to be complete or not. We talked about this earlier too, so I think this is a good recap. Who's involved in it? You need to make sure that the people that from top to bottom that are going to be involved in the design and the execution have a role in the whole planning process. So make sure that you have the right people at the table. You don't leave out a critical stakeholder group or a population of people. And I guess if I was to say one thing, err on the side of more than less. So if you have to choose, if you're unsure if so-and-so should be part of it, it's probably not going to hurt to have them included. It may hurt more if you exclude them. And then the last thing, and the one that matters most, is you need to hyper-focus on execution. The organizations that don't do that, the organizations that think somehow this magic document or this magic tool that you've created is really going to drive success. It's not. It's you, the human beings behind it. You have to be hyper focused on it. We talked about effective meetings, the frequency of those meetings, responsible people, keeping it top of mind, integrating it into your operations. All of those things are must to execute. But these are the 5 things, these are the tenets that you need to have in place to successfully execute a strategy. Tom, I haven't left you much time. Any thoughts on that?
Can I spend one more ditto Dave? Okay, so that's okay. I'll just ditto Dave. And no, absolutely. I've actually only, recently seen these. I think these are excellent, and I've begun using these ideas and, kind of some of the way that I talk about it as strategic planning as well. So I think they're great. The only thing I would add would be it's about relationships. So as you are having conversations internally, third parties, with the team that you're looking to assemble, connect, right? Having that meeting of the minds around, okay, what does strategy mean for you? What are we trying to accomplish? How are we going to know we were successful? Those come through conversations. Those come through relationships. So this absolutely provides the path. But if you're leading it internally, the more connections you can build with individuals and kind of understand where folks are coming from, that's going to be an investment in making sure that we can collectively all get on the same page, like collaboration. But I think these are spectacular.
Awesome, guys. And now as we wrap up here, I just want to get any final thoughts from you guys on strategic planning and what people should be walking away with top of mind. What is most important from this conversation today?
Tom and I can geek out on this all day long. Obviously, we're both passionate, and Tom has more experience in it than I do. But I would say bring enthusiasm to the process. A lot of time we see clients enter into at least performance reviews and some of budget planning season and all this, and it's a labor of effort, not a labor of love. I would say make sure that you really consider this something that's significantly going to benefit your organization. Bring enthusiasm to the design, but more importantly, bring enthusiasm and rigor to the execution, and get people excited about it. And when you have wins, celebrate those wins.
Great point. Yeah, no, I would say, that absolutely, it is a journey. It's I consider it an honor to facilitate a lead, with that. So anyone who has an opportunity to kind of play a role in strategy, I would offer that it is very much an honor. And, the organization's placing a lot of trust in you, and that there are resources and there are tools and there are practices. And to Dave's point, look, even if it's regardless, reach out. We love being sounding boards. We are definitely geeks. I might be more of a geek than Dave. I'm not, at least in that regard, but happy to chat anytime. But no, just appreciate the opportunity to talk today.
All right, Dave, Tom, thank you so much. And thank you so much, everybody who joined us. There will also be a recording of this webinar as well. But everyone, have a great Wednesday. We'll see you later.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Connor.
Thanks. All right. Peace. Thank you.